Hello, everybody. And 1 second, it seems that I have a much bigger screen here. Okay, much better. All right, hello, everybody. Welcome to the next edition of our Career Chat series, which we are going to be bringing back for the next few weeks. Um, I'm, of course, Matt, otherwise known as Matt Beach in some circles. And joined by me today is Andy Clark. So over this way, the cardinal directions are flipped over here. So Andy Clark, who is going to be having a business and esports class coming up for this upcoming school year. So we'll have a lot to chat about that. To kick things off, Andy, would you be willing to give just a quick introduction to yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for having me here today, Matt. My name is Andy Clark. I'm the director of our sports business program here at DePaul. I'm excited for a couple new things coming up in the fall. Obviously, which we're going to talk primarily about today is the business of esports, first new class we're teaching. And also that's for the first time part of we were launching a sports business major and minor. So for the first time, DePaul students will be able to major and minor in sports business. And this is an interdisciplinary major incorporating courses from across the spectrum of the business school and actually the communications, college of communications. So in Department of Marketing, Management, Economics, Hospitality Leadership, and Communication, all different things that relate to the business of sports. I'm really excited about that. And I've told people, that everything involved in the major and the minor are existing courses that we're pulling together, except for one. And that one brand new class is the business of esports. So we're really excited about that. A little bit about my background. I think you kind of asked that, didn't you? So this will be my 7th year as a full-time professor here at DePaul. And as you can see from my hairline, I've been in the workplace for much longer than 7 years. But before that, my history has been always working in sports and sports business. I started my career in athletics at DePaul in tickets. I worked at a couple of big agencies, Edelman, largest PR firm in the world, headed up their sports marketing division for 3 or 4 years. I worked there for almost 10 years. Worked at another big agency called Kramer Krasselt. I was a partner in a software business, Scoutware, that college athletic programs use to manage the recruiting process. And we grew that from nothing to not the biggest business in the world, but we had about 40 employees at our peak, and we were in over 300 colleges and universities, the very biggest ones to smaller ones. Like I know the NAIA is very big in the esports space. And we were official partner of the NAIA, which is kind of a parallel organization of the NCAA, mostly for smaller schools. And I taught an adjunct for a number of years and just got more into it. And so I've been full-time faculty for the last 7 years or so. So that's how I came to DePaul and teaching from that perspective.
Very, very nice. So obviously you have quite the resume as far as like sports marketing and just the sports industry in general is concerned. So how did you learn about like the gaming and esports industry, and what about it do you think was interesting for you to get more involved in it?
Yeah. For a lot of folks, especially, in my age, I attend about 3 or 4 sports marketing industry conferences a year. And I don't know, probably, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago, I don't know the exact year, but you started seeing esports, and I knew nothing, right? I'm not going to say I didn't get a game, right? You started seeing more esports at different conferences where people were talking about esports, and much like myself and other counterparts in the room, you look around the room and people would be going, what are they talking about? But then they would start talking about someone from Twitch or Evil Geniuses or another big team, and they're even sponsors like Schick or early people that got involved, and talk about what it meant for their business. And certainly traditional sports, people with traditional sports background really started to open their eyes into, one, what the power of this market is, and two, how things are done a little bit differently. And it was kind of interesting. So my growth into esports, I saw it grow from where, it was kind of like a one-off kind of thing where someone might present and people go, wow, that's interesting, but I don't know anything about that, to where it's incorporating the fabric of major agencies, major companies, major businesses, to where people are like, how do I get involved in this? And what can we learn from this? And just as a quick aside, just even, why do sports marketers and business people care about esports, right? Just like you don't have to be a football player to be a football fan, right? Most people aren't. If you look at, you can't see me now. If you see me stand up, I've never played football, but it's a lot of it is the demographics, right? The average, I'm going to pick one, the average Major League Baseball season now, average Major League Baseball fan, I think, I'm going to get it exactly right, is about 56, 58 years old. Is that a good long-term strategy? Is that good for your business if your average fan is 56 years old? Like, I'm in that age group, that's nice. But no, the average gamer, the average esports enthusiast, even the age is probably a little bit older than you think. I think it's about 28, 29. So what can you learn if you're Major League Baseball, or you're the NFL, or you're PGA? What can you learn from? That's the audience you want. So how do you do that? So in a long-winded way, that's a little bit about how I came to really kind of engage with gaming, is because I work in the sports space. I work in the sports business space, the sports marketing space. I want to know more about it, and the more you know about it, the more engaging it is. And then so anyways, that's a long-winded answer, I think, to your question.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I mean, like, esports has always been kind of seen as like the like, oh, it's just the new thing. Oh, it's not what everybody's like used to. But you got to also remember, like, if it's newer, then there's going to be a lot more younger people that are interested in it. It's on the rise, so it's not something that's just like.
And you see teams, and I just actually messaged with someone, like whether it be NBA teams, the teams themselves getting involved and purchasing an esports team or getting involved, and so they can marry the two together, or even obviously the players are getting very involved. I just had a connection with actually a friend of mine, actually in London, for all sakes, who started at the NFL. Okay, started at the NFL. She went in sponsorship, moved over to Europe, went to an esports team, G2 Esports, managed their sponsorship portfolio. Why did they hire her? Use their NFL experience, right? Mm-hmm. Now her career's flipped a little bit. She switched with McLaren Racing, which, I don't know if you're familiar with McLaren Racing, one of the top Formula One teams, the most acclaimed Formula One teams in the world. They want her to bring her sponsorship expertise, because the McLaren is involved not just on F1, right, but they're also involved in e-racing, right, which has become, especially with the pandemic, and huge. So how do we bring sponsors to our F1 series and also our esports series? So it's not this outlier thing anymore. It's in the fabric of a lot of stuff. And how do you learn from both, right? So that's an interesting aside on that.
Yeah, I think that's a really great perspective. So really quickly to everybody watching, before we go ahead and move forward, we do have a check-in link for this Career Chat stream. It's been posted in each of the different chat rooms for each of the streams so far. So feel free to check into that. Or if you see this little QR code down that way, yeah, I think that's the correct direction. Yes, thank you. Right down there, you can just go ahead and scan that. You'll get checked in for a chance to win a tile, which will be drawn during this week on DePaul, which will be drawn a little bit later this week on Friday, July 30th. So yeah, get in on that. So, as we were talking about, like, there's ways to like marry the two between like sports and esports, or traditional sports and esports. So this is kind of where your business and esports class kind of comes into play, right? So it's kind of like, as you had already mentioned, it's a really big landmark for DePaul's gradual foray into the esports world. For anybody watching who might not be aware of it, can you give a quick intro on the class?
Yeah, I mean, it is what it sounded. We were trying to come up with a creative name, but it's the business of esports, right? And so, and that's, that on one hand, it's kind of narrow. The other, like, it's a big focus, right? What is the world of esports? It's from concert, it's everything, right? Gaming, it's a lot of different forums, a lot of different platforms. The courses we've taught up to now, are the courses, in my courses, and if anybody on here has been in any of my sports business courses, esports is just almost always a component of it, whether it being a project, whether it be having a guest speaker, whether visiting the DePaul Esports Center and learning the business behind that. It's always been a part of that. But as the industry grows, and then as the reason why is DePaul involved in gaming in such a big way? Because the president had a vision that we want to be a gaming school. No, it's because what people want, right? You want to engage with what your students want and what they do, and you want to give them a better forum to do that. Much the same way here. Why do people? I have students. I want to work in sports. I want to do that. I have a passion for sports. I may not be, the best baseball player, basketball player in the world, but I like being connected to the game. Same thing here. As the business of esports grows, which it is phenomenally, there's needs for people with, one, a passion for it, but more than just like, when I had a speaker not too long ago who tells me, who said, works for a big team, said, you know what, if you tell me you're a fan, I'm going to tell you to go buy a ticket, right? We don't necessarily need fans of it. We need people with transferable business skills. So esports is no different than any other business. You need people with experience in events. You need people with experience in communications. You need people that can sell, right? You can sell from the sponsorship place, from the ticket space. You need legal backgrounds. You need all those kinds of things. So what the core of the class is about is how do you tie your passion for esports or an understanding of it to a career, and how those two kind of fit together. And so how are we going to do that? We're going to explore that through, like many of my classes, through terrific guest speakers, some of which DePaul alums who are working in the space, to a real world group project that will probably, a conversation goes, okay, maybe with Evil Geniuses, and from a sponsorship perspective, I have a call later next week, and maybe with NRG Esports. Some of you guys know Hawk Nelson, who does sponsorship consulting with them. But it will be something with an outside organization in the esports space. So when you walk out of this, much like an internship, even though it's not an internship, you'd have a project that I worked with a major esports organization on a specific charge, just like now in the non-esports space, we're doing a project with the Cubs now, that you'd be able to share that project in an interview setting, attach it to your resume. And also you get a better understanding. You're able to expand your network. You do a good job with that and say, tell me about this Evil Geniuses project. How the heck did you do that, right? It's just a better conversation piece in an interview. But more than anything, I'll circle back to being more than anything, the core of it is, how do I got a passion for this. I like this. How could I possibly make a career out of this? That's kind of the goal to this.
Yeah, I think that's a really good place to start, because once again, this is pretty unprecedented. The idea of an esports class, at DePaul, let alone pretty much any private school at this point.
Yeah.
It's still a very, very rare and new topic. So, trying to get people on the right path to trying to make something out of their their skills and, their passion for esports is a really, really big deal. So I think having this kind of having this pathway to future career point is really, really helpful. Just a really generally great resource for a lot of students that are interested.
Yeah, and I can add to that, because that's kind of why you're here, right? I mean, you're here whether you're here in this chat or you're here at DePaul. I mean, you want a career that is satisfying, right? Financially, personally, and from a growth perspective, right? So doing something that you're passionate about, that's what you're here for. That's what I think. That's what you're here for, right? You want to do something that's fulfilling and engaging. And it's my goal with this class is to help you start that, right? It's not going to be everything. It's all in. It's a 10-week class, but it's a tipping off point.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, going off of that, of course, you've kind of answered this a little bit over the course of the past few questions, but what made you want to host a class at DePaul about esports, specifically the business of esports? Would you be able to kind of summarize your thoughts on that really quickly, or maybe why DePaul in specific?
Yeah, no, yeah. Well, that's a great question. So you're right. I answered part A to that. Yeah. But I think, from my perspective, you don't know what A and B is yet till I tell you what B is. But B is more about, being very involved. We have this esports, I forget what it's called, steering committee, task force, whatever. It's everybody involved in esports from the beginning. And I've been involved with it since they started, since really the gaming center was open. I don't know, maybe it wasn't that long ago, right? It was 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, I believe it was 2018. I want to say 2018. Yeah.
I think so 2018. Okay, so it's only 3 years. It seems longer because we've come a long way, and seeing And the reason I was invited to be part of that, again, wasn't because of my in-depth gaming experience, because of my sports business and sports marketing experience, and how does this fit together beyond, just opening a gaming center, which is really cool, and intercollegiate games, is how can we look at this at a bigger picture perspective? So as we've through that, I've learned a ton. I talked about a few minutes ago what I've learned, externally at conferences and meetings and sessions, but internally at DePaul, and learning and seeing firsthand the engagement and why esports is growing at DePaul, both from the team's perspective and kicking ass in the Big East to seeing the centers filled up and people engaged and learning the different elements to it and being able to see firsthand the impact it has on students, both, from a game perspective, but also from a bonding and a reason to be here perspective. So, all of that, seeing that at DePaul and seeing the impact it's had, right, for students, it made me want to say, hey, let's take this a step further, not just from, yes, you can be a gamer, but also you can make a career out of this, and a very lucrative one. So that's how marrying what I've learned outwardly and what I've learned at DePaul and saying, hey, let's build a class around this.
Yeah, I think that's a really great answer. I'm glad that you're able to acknowledge the the passion for esports amongst the the general student body at DePaul in such a very tangible way. I want to say it because like you said, it's about making careers out of it.
Yeah, and another student, even from whether it be even there, and some of you guys, Kevin O'Brien, who just graduated a year ago, and he's at a very cool startup company, GG Leagues, and which is about creating opportunities in youth programs and rec centers and park districts and high schools, and give them a platform to easily create an esports environment. But his introduction to esports, well, selfishly, I'm proud to say, came from a class. I was in my introduction to sports management class, and we had our esports session in the gaming center, and it opened his eyes and blown away, and his interest grew from there. So seeing it from a business side and saw, hey, I want to be in business, I want to grow and my expertise, there's a real opportunity here. And here's an example of one person in a short time that's done a lot of cool things with that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great example of just the best of both worlds, the business and the esports side, being able to bring them together in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, I guess, really quickly, if there's is there anything that students interested in your class currently that may be a little bit on the fence about signing up for, or are willing to sign up for right now? Is there anything that these students that are, interested right now, is there something they should know before registering for it?
Yeah. You should have a really good attitude. Yeah. And want to learn. No, it sounds trite, but students may. I'm glad you asked that. They say, well, yeah, I don't have it's open to any all students, right? You don't have to be in the business school. I don't have a business background. I didn't take account. No, this is about learning about the business elements to the program. We're not looking for consultants to come in, right? We're looking for people that have a passion about gaming and want to learn how they can make a career out of this in a way, or a starting point to get some thoughts to it. So if you're thinking about it or thinking maybe you're hesitant about that, come in with an open mind and wanting to learn, right? That's really what this is about. And because you're gonna hear from some really cool people that have interesting stories, and some of their stories are kind of a straight line, like Hawk Nelson, who's I'm sure he's talked to your group and been part of this.
Yeah.
DePaul grad, and he's always wanted to do this, right? And he's always, made it happen to somebody else who's took a different tier. Jose Espin, who was involved in esports here at DePaul, and consulted for the Big Ten Network, but now he works for a big ad agency, Digitas and analytics, both on and a little bit of esports, everything else. So your career can take different things, and how this can apply. So my long-winded answer is, come with a good attitude and wanting to learn, and that's what you need for this class. On I think Tuesday afternoons, Management 344. Make my own plug, Management 344 on Tuesday afternoons, and I think you get a ton out of it.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. Thank you so much for that. I think that's definitely something to keep in mind. Just like you said, it's easy to take for granted, being willing to learn something new when you enter a class like this for the first time. So
right.
I think it's definitely still important to just put it out there. So then really quickly, once again, to everybody watching, before we continue on with the last couple of questions, make sure you check in. If you are able to scroll up a little bit in your respective chat room, based on where you're watching this, you might see the check-in link from right there. Otherwise, you can just take out your smartphone and scan the QR code right here in the bottom right corner of the screen. This will check you in for a chance to win a tile, which is a really nice little security device. Helps you find things when they get lost. I know that I lose my stuff all the time, especially since I'm in the middle of a move right now. So, being able to have something that helps me keep track of everything in one place is very, very helpful. So make sure you get to that. So the last couple of questions that I have for you, Andy, today are pretty much based on a little bit more of the esports industry, as a whole. But more so, kind of reflective in a sense. So the first one would be, of course, what's something that you wish you would have known about the gaming and esports industry before you got a little bit more involved?
Well, that's a good question. More I think it's something I've kind of learned is kind of what I just asked everyone to come with an open mind, have an open mind to the complexity and diversity of this, right? Is that at first, your first gaming, and again, I came to this looking at what is this? And Twitch, I look at the numbers and seeing that, what do you talk, having an open mind to the different elements to it and every way you could approach it, right? Gaming isn't one thing, right? So it's just saying I'm a fan of sports, right? That's well, what sport are you a fan of, right? And so there's so it's the same thing here. There's so many different aspects to it, and there's so many different links to it, and so many ways to one, participate, observe. I'm trying to find the right word, but in different kinds of formats, right? Whether it be NBA 2K or different things like that, or more first-person shooter games, which we only do at DePaul, to other stuff. It's all in the universe, right? But how it fits together and being open and being able to, which is what big company, not even big and small companies, how do we better align our values to gaming so it gets our message out right? So I guess, I hope that answered your question, but
yeah,
being able to understand it from a big picture, which took me a little bit to get to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's just great advice in general for anybody that's trying to be involved in esports from a business perspective in any way, really.
Yeah.
Because, just so many times, in the past, I've kind of been watching esports for the past 10 years. And I know especially early on, there were a lot of companies that try to understand esports by kind of not trying to understand the medium itself, but are more so just trying to do their own thing and try to make very, very small adjustments for esports without actually understanding what it's all about. So, trying to make sure that you have that level of understanding, I think, is absolutely very, very important. So I'm glad you're able to mention that.
Okay.
So last thing really quick, as we start to look ahead, we've had quite a few changes in the esports industry over the past year. And, looking ahead, where do you see collegiate esports moving in the next few years?
Well, I mean, certainly over, collegiate esports has been a kind of an outlier thing when you talk about sports, right? They got its own path. The NCAA, has been dancing around esports for a while. And the main barrier to esports being, more of I hate to use the word mainstream, because I think if you're a game, mainstream is the last thing you want to be, right? In some ways. But to tie to the NCAA was always a non-starter because of, if you're a gamer, if you're streaming, or if you're doing whatever, you don't want to give up your revenue platform to participate in the NCAA if that's what it means, right? And that's why at a bigger picture, colleges haven't got involved. Now if you follow the name, image, and likeness legislation and changes in college, which has just happened over the last few weeks, where student athletes can derive revenue from other sources, right? And that was always the barrier to, say, the NCAA having bigger gaming competitions and scholarships and things like that, and that's not happening. That barrier has been pretty much removed.
Yeah.
Now, so you're gonna see changes dramatically over the next few years, where colleges or whatever well, what do we do with this? How do we approach it? Because we don't want to get involved in the payment. That's kind of out the window. So as just like the reason DePaul is involved or schools are involved, they want to be involved because that's what their students are interested in. And so if that's what they're interested in, and I think you're already going to see that more as an aside in corporate, and I think you're going to see that at DePaul as well, where the main focus of, in a lot of ways, the Wintrust Arena and DePaul, men's and women's basketball games, I think you're going to see more esports being incorporated in that, whether it be at halftime stuff, whether it be the gamification elements of the games themselves, right? That's part of that. So you're going to see a lot more of that, to where, it's not just esports over here and then here's our athletic department. You're going to see more interaction with that, both at DePaul and across the collegiate landscape.
Yeah, that sounds great. So, I mean, you're saying more like you think there's going to be a little bit more like unity between like esports and like other aspects of like.
I think the major thing that kind of separated a little bit was the fact that, hey, and both, right? If you're a game like you could go play at a scholarship, but that means I can't, derive any revenue from this. You're like, I'm not doing that, right? That's, I'm not giving up my money for that. And so as a non-starter, you take that out of the equation, you're going to see, and the impact of just like what's done at DePaul, the impact that gaming has had on student involvement. You multiply that through all kinds of schools. Schools want to figure out how to better engage their students. Esports is a top thing to do that. You're going to see that grow in a lot of areas, and not just from big university-wide teams, but more engagement at every level.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a very, very exciting time to be involved.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I think that's all the time that we have for this interview today. So, Andy, thank you so much for your time and for this wonderful conversation about esports and about business.
Thanks for having me, and I hope to see anyone here in the fall, which is coming up quickly. And in the meantime, and if you're full in the fall, or you just have a question, you want to talk about getting into sports or the business of sports or how it relates to esports, my email's on the flyer that I think you guys have, but it's aclark32@depaul.edu. Happy to chat or talk with anybody anytime. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Wonderful. And of course, once again, business and esports, Tuesday afternoons, correctly?
Correct.
Or is that correct? Okay, yeah, perfect. Great.
Yeah.
So everybody make sure you look that up. I know course carts are going to slowly start to fill up for everybody. So, make sure you get registered before it's too late for you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Once we do have more episodes of Career Chats or any other DePaul live streams coming up, to just find us on our socials at twitter.com/DePaul Esports. We have our Discord server as well, discord.gg/DePaul Esports. And of course, we have our newsletter, which you can find via DHub. So, all right. Well, this has been a really great time. Andy, once again, thank you so much for coming by. And we hope to see you all sometime soon.
All right. Thank you.